Well, hi guys. I'm here to give an overview of literary theories, and it's not meant to replace a book, obviously. And I'm just trying to give small definitions of each theory so that it can be a helpful guide. In a way, you can just listen to it when you're on the way to your exam or something. So here we go. What is literary theory? Now, literary theory is an act of interpreting or analyzing a work of art, a work of literature. Now, it's not only analyzing the importance of the work, it's also coming to a reasonable conclusion about what the author intended the work to mean, and also to understand how certain cultures or ideologies would interpret or understand the work. New criticism. New criticism was taken from John Crow Ransom's 1941 essay of the same title. Now, new critics doesn't care about the author or his intention behind a work. They only care about the formal features of the text. Work is autonomous, or a text is autonomous according to them. So imagine we are analyzing Sonnet 154 from Shakespeare, the Shakespearean Sonnet 154, and Shakespeare comes to us and says,
"Let me talk about Sonnet 154.
We'll say, well, we don't care what you say, because we are gonna look at the formal features, alliteration, rhyming scheme, rhythm, because that's how we'll understand the work. So that's new criticism. Structuralism. Structuralism is an extension of new criticism and what they practiced. New critics obviously looked at the formal features, and likewise structuralists looked at the formal features in specific genres such as poetry, novel. So they are interested in the units in a structure that results in the meaning. To understand structure more clearly, English, let's see it as a structure. And each unit, the parts of the language, is its units. Now, only if you understand English as a structure, you'll understand what I'm telling you now. Let's look at someone who is wearing a very low jeans. Now, if you know the structure, the fashion industry, the hip culture, I'm not new to this one. So, if you know that when you see a guy wearing a very low jeans, then you'll understand, okay, this is part of the structure, the so-called hip culture, the fashion industry. But if you are unaware of this certain industry or the culture, then you'll see the guy and you might wonder, maybe the clothes aren't fitting him, maybe he's a poor person. So the structure gives it meaning. Another example is the red lipstick that you think I'm wearing. It's not red, but in an Indian culture, and especially at night in a rural area, if you wear red lipstick and walk out at night, people interpret it as, you coming from a different background, let's say prostitute. But the same red lipstick I can wear with the red dress and go out for a dinner. So the same red lipstick has different meaning because of the different structures it belongs to. So the structure gives it meaning. Russian formalism. Now, Russian formalists wanted to understand how the work of literature possessed literariness. Now, literariness is a special use of everyday language. Let's say if I want to say I love you to my husband, if I put some literariness into it, it would be, my love is like a red, red rose, or my love is like snowfall, is like a snowfall. or like a rainfall on a dry land. So this special use of the language engages the reader's attention, and this is what Shklovsky named as defamiliarization. So they are interested in the formal features of language that gives literature that literariness, the special use. Post-structuralism. Like the word suggests, post-structuralism, it comes after structuralism, and it encompasses all the approaches that came after structuralism that took some of the conclusions that structuralists put forward to a different extent. Now, if you believe what structuralists are saying, and if you reach the conclusion, then language is unstable. As Social said, language is arbitrary. If you follow all these arguments, you understand that there is no definite meaning. There are gaps and contradictions in language itself. So post-structuralism is a philosophical approach, and yes, sometimes we do use it interchangeably with postmodernism. But post-structuralism, the works, it doesn't have a single author. The author would be unreliable. They don't believe in a unified theory. Deconstruction. Now, Jacques Derrida is the one who developed it, and it is a post-structuralist method or approach. So Derrida looks at texts very closely and finds the gaps and contradictions present in the text. Now, deconstructionist analysis or using etymology, let's look at the two words, guest and host. Now, I'm the host, you're coming to my house, you're the guest, you're welcome. That's why you're a guest, not a stranger. But if you look at the etymology or the root of the word host and guest, it has the same root. And the host comes from the Latin word hostis, which also means enemy or stranger. So it also shows the potentially unwelcome status of the guest, because the host could be an enemy or a stranger. So the guest, again, there's a contradiction. If it's an enemy or a stranger, the other person who comes, can he be a guest? Remember, they both have the same root too, and hostess mean enemy or stranger. So there is a repressed hostility in the word guest itself. So if there is repressed hostility in the word guest itself, then how can you look at the relationship between guest and host as a stable relationship? No, you can't. That's the deconstructionist reading of this relationship by Derrida. Postmodernism. Postmodernism and post-structuralism, like I said earlier, it is used interchangeably. Now, postmodernism is both a philosophical approach, and it can also be used to describe the characteristics of an object or a text. So it's both a philosophy and something that categorizes something, work of art. So postmodernism also destroys the notions of a single author, a meta-narrative, a unifying theory a theory that could help us make sense of everything around us. They don't have the idea. I'll give you an example with a painting. Yeah, that's postmodernism. Psychoanalytic criticism. Now, psychoanalytic criticism looks at the psyche by looking deeper at cultural texts or literary texts. Now, culture always represents our animalistic instincts, our desires that aren't culturally accepted, and sexuality has the top position of in the list of items that, desires that are repressed by culture. So obviously that's the main thing, or sexuality is the main thing that comes out as concealed objects or concealed ideas or something concealed in a character in works of art. And psychoanalytic criticism looks at these features. The film Sucker Punch, I think it's a really good example, because it actually the whole movie practically is the physical manifestation of what the primary character goes through in her psyche. Maybe you should check that out. Feminisms. Now, feminism is both a political stance and a theory. It studies gender and its representation in literary works. It has a political stance too. It's a philosophical approach, but it's also it has a political stance in terms of fighting for justice and equality. Now, for example, Rapunzel from our old story, not the Tangled version, she's a damsel in distress. I think the best example for a stereotypical representation of a woman who's waiting for a guy to save her, trapped in a tower because she can't do anything on her own. Now, it's problematic because it's, the representation itself is problematic. Women are not like that. But when it becomes a work of art, it becomes reality too, because it affects social change. It becomes a truth in society as well. So that's why this theory has this double stance. Marxism. Now, Marxism explores power relations or conditions present in works of art. Now, and it links actual social conditions to works of art. Post-colonialism. Now, post-colonialism tries to read, interpret, and critique the power of the colonial power over the colonized. Now, the colonizer always has an advantage over the colonized in their representation, in any form of representation, be it work of art, be it a legal system, because until a few years back, even the scientific data from top universities in the Western world, you could say that the colonizer had power over it, because the data was mostly based on white male, not based on the minorities. So it can be present in science, legal system, culture, everywhere you look. So post-colonialism tries to understand how power is represented and how it has power over the colonized in representation. Queer theory. Now it looks at the history of cultural representation of gays and lesbians and other groups. Now, it has always been problematic because the group has always been represented as deviant people, criminals, something abnormal. So it also looks at, it's also a political stance, because like feminism, they need to fight for equality and justice, equal rights. So it does have the two stances, philosophical and political, because representation leads to actual oppression. And it emerged as gay and lesbian studies too. New Historicism. Now, New Historicism, even the word says that the history part, because they give importance to both the history of the critic and the history of the author. So if Shakespeare had come to our new historicists like he came to our new critics, then they would have openly welcomed it because they would have loved to know the history of the author. Now, the beliefs, the prejudices, the social conventions during the time in which the critic or the author lived in definitely must have influenced them, and new historicists definitely want to know how that has influenced the work. Ecocriticism. Ecocriticism is the study of literature and environmentalism from an interdisciplinary point of view. Now, literary scholars analyze texts that represent environmental concerns, and also they try to understand how nature is treated as a subject in works of art. Now, my personal favorite is Pankaj Seksaria and his works. Well, if you're interested in eco-criticism, you should definitely have a look at him and his works. Thank you.